I think most of the challenges I would say stem from unhelpful ideas and misinformation about men and about men who've been sexually abused, whether they're ideas that men themselves have been influenced by and struggle with, and or whether it's hearing things from other workers outside of the field about, getting angry when you hear people perpetuate the victim to offender stuff, or but of course being in a position where it's obviously much more productive to try to have a conversation with workers around that. And what do you do with feeling just frustrated and pissed off that another person's spouting this really nonsensical stuff for the umpteenth time? Or how do you kind of sit with that, or how do you deal with that in a helpful way? I think I don't know if this is specific to working with men. I think probably all people that have experienced, or many people who've experienced sexual abuse will often have times of sitting with a lot of despair, and often we're witness to that in our role. I often feel that perhaps the most helpful thing to do in those times is to acknowledge the depth of that person's despair and allow that to be there, in an attempt to join, not in the despair, but allow the space where that can be acknowledged.
Probably the challenge for me in working in this area is often an organisational environment, or other stuff that's happening in our community, where I hear stories told about men who've been abused, or that people are inconsiderate or judgmental of people who've been sexually abused, be they men or women. I find that quite challenging. Finding ways to inform and assist people to understand different perspectives, and so that's probably one of the things, because I kind of do this work and I've done it for a number of years now. I do struggle when people don't have an understanding of all the barriers to people obtaining assistance, of not having an understanding of what may or may not be useful for working in this area, because I see that there is a kind of body of knowledge around this stuff, and I suppose I find it challenging when people don't take care in making sure they're informed and they're providing the right support and care for people in this area.
The first thing, working with men means you're needing to have capacity to tolerate rage. For women, I notice they're more as distress, but for men there's a lot of expression of rage. So I think it's important to be able to tolerate, work with, not shy away from, not minimise the rage that men feel, but to also assist them to channel it in ways that's healthy in expression of it.
Part of the challenge is, as I've developed as a therapist, I've had to do a lot of therapy and excavation work and building a resilient nervous system in myself so that I can sit with very intense emotions and feel comfortable with that. So I think, that's a challenge for all therapists in my view, that we need to do our own therapy to know ourselves pretty deeply and feel comfortable with our own emotions, to be able to be present and hold the space for someone who's working through their emotional world.
I think also with drug and alcohol issues, particularly when mental health issues, that dual diagnosis is present. Again, it's finding a place within those two very difficult areas that people are struggling with as well. It's finding a useful space within them, because you're often working alongside other workers as well. So you don't want to complicate the work that they're doing, but working in a comparable, coordinated way. I find that sometimes a challenge, because you don't really know what other work is being done. You don't know when the drugs, the medications are going to be changed. so you're not part of that overall plan. So I find that a bit of a challenge at times. It can feel a little as though you're working in isolation when there's not that coordinated approach. Sometimes it's a challenge when people don't turn up. That doesn't happen as often as it used to, I must say. If people don't turn up to an appointment, I've usually got a good sense of why not. So it doesn't really perturb me too much now. In the beginning it did. I would take it a little personally in some ways. I'd think, oh, I'm not being an effective practitioner, or there's something that I didn't do that I should have done. Now I think I realise people have very complex lives and there's a lot going on in them, and this is only one part of their lives. And if they choose not to come, there's usually a very good reason for that. So I don't worry about that so much. I guess I don't worry about my clients in the way that I might have in the past, and I realise that you know, we're only one part of a very complicated chain in their lives, and that, you know, we're a resource as much as many other things are. That change is something that is dependent on a whole range of issues, and we're only one small part of it. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything much else that is overly challenging for me in terms of being a problem. There's a lot that's challenging in terms of wanting to know more and wanting to do things better. I think that's something that's always there. There's always a sense that one could be more helpful, more useful.
When I find myself you know, working with somebody and change isn't happening, or for them you know, that we continue to struggle with how to manage or how to support somebody through this. And I think that what happens for me is that, you know, I find myself wondering, you know, whether I should, you know, whether I'm doing the best by this person, whether I have enough knowledge and skill to do that. And I think that's always useful to do that, because there's the question of making sure somebody's linked in with somebody who does do that work. You know, I don't know everything. You know, there's times when I might work for a period, and it might be that somebody might be better off seeing somebody else at that time after a period. I think that's important to kind of always not be the person who's meant to know everything or know how to sort all this out. I think it is, you know, self-doubt, like for the people we work with, is it's something that you know, I find myself questioning. I think one of the things also is to be aware for myself around, if I spend time thinking a lot about a client or about what's happening, I have to check in about, you know, my own kind of self-care and about who's responsible for what in this process. But I think it's really important to reflect on my work and be clear about whether, or to think through whether there's alternative ways of responding or assisting a client when I'm struggling with that. It's about not having the answers, and so and sometimes I'm kind of okay with not having the answers, and sometimes I need to, you know, do some work on that.
It can be exhausting work. It can be quite emotionally draining. I mean, all the opposite is true as well. You know, you get the greatest rewards doing this kind of work, but it's long-term and difficult work. It's not like helping someone with a spider phobia. It's you know, it's the hardcore, I think.
Something I often struggle with is, throughout their life, men may have developed a story or an understanding about themselves that every struggle they face or every difficulty they have is somehow a result of the abuse that they've experienced. And of course, as a worker, it's important to be respectful and acknowledging of how men do make sense of that for themselves. But I think it's important to offer opportunities to talk about facing those struggles, facing difficulties is not a sign of failure, it's not a sign of damage, it's part of being human. And particularly a lot of those ideas around masculinity are shared with lots of men who, you know, who might... We all have to negotiate these ideas about what the right way to be a man is, and some of those might not fit very well with other ideas we have about how to be in a relationship, or ideas about sex, or ideas about, you know, whether it's being a parent, or, you know, all these kinds of things. So I think, you know, that's a struggle that I find is often I guess trying to explore the bigger context of a lot of difficulties that men might be dealing with, where there might have been a strong story also sitting there that all difficulties are the result of trauma or the result of abuse.
One young man I remember working with I was pretty new to working in this area, and we started talking about his family of origin, and that started to get close to the abuse because his father was the abuser. And he became more and more dissociated during the session, and I wasn't really aware of how to look for that, signs of that. And then he went away, and then 2 hours later his housing worker called me up and said, "What happened in that session? Because he's slashing up." And that was devastating for me to hear that I was, you know, contributing to that. So I think one of the challenges is helping people to come to therapy and process stuff, but in a window of tolerance where they can explore difficult stuff but stay safe and not get triggered into overwhelming feelings and then go away and engage in self-destructive behaviours. So teaching and supporting clients how to track themselves, as I was saying earlier in the interview, that's been really challenging to learn how to do that well. And some clients, they want to come in and they want to talk, and they think that that's how they're going to resolve their trauma, is to talk about the worst things that's happened to them. And sometimes I have to interrupt them and say, we need to slow down because my concern is that you're going to flood yourself with too many feelings too quickly. And so sometimes I found I have to be quite directive around supporting the safety to happen.
There's a man I'm working with at the moment who, I suppose I would have questioned the referral in relation to our existing policy around men who've been violent. However, we agreed, and I agreed to see him, and I think we've done some good work together. However, initially it took me a while to actually feel comfortable working with him, because I was holding my views about him. And I guess through external supervision I was able to challenge those views and also look challenge those views and find something that something about him and the work that I could focus on. But he was a very intimidating man who'd been in prison a number of times, I believe for serious crimes that he hadn't disclosed, because the sentences, to me, in my experience, warranted serious crimes. And yeah, very intimidating in his presence. Very strong man who wouldn't give a shit whether he went back to prison because he could take care of himself very easily. Did not like women. And well, I guess there wasn't a context to that at the beginning. Saw himself as very physically and emotionally guarded, and so it was really hard working with someone who had that amount of protection. But of course, there's a context of that. Of course, there is. So through external supervision, in particular, with someone who's a very experienced practitioner, I was able to find something that I could reach across and work with him, that he was willing to share. So just having acknowledging that it was very difficult working with him because it came across as being very fierce and guarded, and I didn't feel safe at first working with him. And I think after 16, 17 sessions, he is now starting to let his guard down a bit, and sometimes I have to challenge his views about he thinks all women are manipulators and controllers, and there aren't any decent women in the world. To him actually saying that he could talk about one person, one woman, who he thought was good. But his experience of women in his life has been terrible. His mother, his sister-in-law, they've controlled his life, kept him, on medication. So he was compliant and would go along with what the family were hiding. And one of the secrets they were hiding was his abuse. And he's starting to remember things that he's talking about. So I think, there's enough trust now that he's letting his guard down a little, which is great. And he does say it is helpful to come and talk with you because no one else listens to me. His whole life has been full of not being listened to. So once again, getting back to the listening, which I found difficult at first because there was just this big, it's been an evolving process, I suppose, in terms of myself as a practitioner. I think we are, professional experience, confronted by some people that do make it difficult to do the work. And I think this was probably because I'm a very strong feminist and known, I guess, in the organisation as having strong feminist beliefs. And so I had to confront that and put that aside. Well, not put it aside, but see the vulnerability. That's what I found, the vulnerability, which took me a while because of his guarding and my views. Mm-hmm. It was a real learning experience for me as a practitioner.